Parshas Vayechi, and we're coming to really the end of the book of Bereshis, and the end of the whole story. We refer to each book has different names, right? But there's also concepts, and the book of Bereshis is always questioned as to what's the purpose of it, because if the purpose of the Torah is to educate us, to teach, right, to tell us about the mitzvot, and to educate us into how to be good people, what do you need the book of Bereshis for? That God created the world, God made a flood, Abraham came around, Isaac came around, Esau, right, and all the stories. They're very nice, and it's a nice history, and it's good to know, but it's not telling you doesn't tell you what to do. You have like half a dozen mitzvahs in this whole book, and you have more than that in one parsha in the upcoming books. You have circumcision, you have be fruitful and multiply, you don't eat the part of the animal because it's like Yaakov, right? So really, what's the purpose? So the commentaries say that that this book teaches a person how you're supposed to act, because it's the book of the straight ones, they say, those who are straight, because look how they act, how Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, how they act, and the ones who act badly, how badly they act, and why, and what we learn from it. Like, just as an example, we learned just recently about Yehuda, right, he has this what appears to be an inappropriate relationship with a woman, and then it turns out he's the judge whose job is to judge her, right? And he figures out through it, right, that really he was the father of her child, and that but she doesn't tell anybody because she doesn't want to humiliate him, and she's going to get killed, because what she did was wrong. And Yehuda stands up and he says, she's more righteous than I am. She's the right person, and therefore that's me. It says that I should take that out. So and he admits what he did. Because of that, he did. It was a great thing. I mean, imagine he was the judge. All he had to do was say nothing, and she'd be dead. No one would ever find out what he did, right? Or let's say, okay, I mean, that's a horrible thing. How could a person allow someone to be killed and say that that's okay? So he's also the judge. He could say, new evidence has arrived, and we're going to hold off. We're not going to kill her now. We're going to investigate to make sure that we're right. And then just take a long time, like governments do. And people will forget about it, and nothing will happen. Right? And this way he doesn't hurt her, and he doesn't admit it. But he gets up and he says, she's more righteous than me, and he admits what he did, even though he's a great leader, and he doesn't think, that I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my position, no one's going to talk to me. He says, this is what's right. Right? So here you learn the idea of the importance of doing the right thing. Right? That's what this book teaches us. It teaches us how to act. It doesn't tell us necessarily all the laws, but it says the definition of what a good person is. How a good person acts, how a person is kind, a person buries people who are dead, a person who helps the poor. That's what we learn in this book. Right? It doesn't tell us what we have to do. It shows us who we are, right? Who we come from. And so here in the last chapter of it, we now are almost at the next stage. The next stage is, as we start the next book, is that from creating people, right, the Jewish individuals, or what we say are Hebrew people, because they weren't Jewish yet, we are about to create the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation gets created in the next book. In this book, it's the Hebrew people who become the Jewish nation. And so we've learned now how to be a person, one of the Hebrew people who follows certain rules and customs, and we have certain character. And we're about to enter into the stage where we become the Jewish nation. And here is like the seed of that, because all of the 12 tribes are alive, right? They're all alive. Yaakov is still alive. Yosef is still alive, and they're in Egypt, where they're going. We know they're going to go into slavery, right? And that will be the beginning of the Jewish people. So this is sort of the transferring parsha that takes us from the group of nomadic people, the Jewish people, who are given a land finally, the land of Israel, who then become a nation. And this is the point where it happens. It switches. We see in this parsha.
Sorry, Dina doesn't feature into being, from a woman's point of view, having a tribe. She had to follow one of the brothers.
Well, it's true.
Yeah.
And even in a perfect situation where Dina didn't have any problems, right, where she was kidnapped and so forth, she probably wouldn't even have been mentioned. And it's not because she's a woman that she wouldn't be mentioned. It's because that nothing extraordinary came of her. In other words, not that she wasn't a special person, but there were, you could have lots of special people in the world who do amazing things, but nothing comes from them afterwards. So with her, we don't know anything much about it. The only thing we do know is that, according to most, her daughter married Yosef. That the daughter that she had when she was raped by this man ended up marrying Yosef. And then the children of Yosef, Ephraim and Manasseh, are her children. That we know, but it doesn't tell us this explicitly anywhere.
But now, if you look at the previous couple of pages, they've got in the previous, they've got the whole setup there of the whole family.
The genealogy,
the
right?
Descendant, yeah, right. And they've got Dina without any...
Right, because it's not explicit in the Torah. What I just told you is from the Medrash.
Yeah.
Right, we have the Medrash. We always say that Medrash is true, but it's not necessarily always literally true. In other words, the Medrash can tell you that Moshe was 20 amos tall, makes him about 30 feet tall. And a Medrash can tell you that Pharaoh was the same size as your thumb, makes him about 3 inches tall. Right, now, of course, that probably... If Moshe was 25 feet tall and Pharaoh was 3 inches tall, he probably didn't have to have much fear of negotiating with him. He could just simply step on him, right? So it's not literal. There is something, it's telling you something about the greatness of Moshe that he, by showing you that to a symbol of him being so big, and the the smallness of Pharaoh, probably more so the small-mindedness of Pharaoh, as symbolized by the fact that he's only 3 inches tall. Not that it necessarily means that he was literally 3 inches tall. So the Medrash sometimes is literal. It could be that it was literally true that Dina's daughter married Yosef, or it could be that it wasn't literally true. That's why you're not going to find it in these types of examples, right? The black and white genealogy. You're going to find it in Medrash only. Okay, so our parsha begins telling us that Yaakov, right, and all of his children now are living in the land of Egypt, and that the end of Yaakov's life is coming. That's what it says. Vayi yamei Yaakov shnei chayav, right? And these were the days of Yaakov, the years of his life, and it says how old he is when he dies, or when he's about to die. Now the commentaries ask us a question just on this first sentence, which says that why do they tell us 2 ways of counting Yaakov's life? It says, even in the English, it says, Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, and the days of Jacob, the years of his life. Right? What does that mean? 17 years and the days of Jacob, the years of his life. Why don't you leave out the word, the days of Jacob? He lived in Egypt 17 years. The years of his life were 147. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. So what's this extra words in here, the days of Jacob? You could say that Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years and the days of Jacob were 147 years. That also makes sense. But they're mixing their metaphors. First it's telling you years, days, and then telling you years. So which is it? Right? One of those quotes there, those 3 words, is unnecessary. So the commentaries tell us that it's not unnecessary. It's telling us something else. In the one case, it's saying, Yaakov lived for 17 years in the land of Egypt, and the years of his life were 140 years, 147 years. Right? So when it says, and the days of his life, so here it says that we learn from Abraham. He has the same, it says that the days of Abraham were full, and he went before God. Meaning that he died. In that case, when it talks about days, here it says that in a person's life, right, you could have a very meaningful life. You could have a life that changes the world. But you could have most of that life, even for a person who changes the world, you do nothing. It could be that a person is 80 years old, and during the 80 years of their life, they did something that was enormous. Right? They made peace in the Middle East. Whatever it was that they did something enormous. Right? The rest of their life, they didn't. Like, let's say the last 25 years of their life, they just retired and took it easy. That's not an insult, but that's what they did. So it's telling you here, by telling you that the years and the days, is that every single day of Yaakov's life was productive. That it was something good. Just like what it says with Abraham, it says that Abraham came before God with his days. So what does it mean? He came with his days. Right? It's coming to tell you that every single day of his life, something meaningful happened. He did something meaningful. He didn't say, oh, you know what, I'm 80 years old already, I'm going to retire and take a break. He said, I'm working. I'm going to keep growing and changing and helping the rest of my entire life. And that's what it's saying with Yaakov. It's saying that not only was Yaakov 147 years old, but that every day of that life was worthwhile, was meaningful, something came from it, which is why Yaakov was Yaakov. Right? Most of us can't say that, and most of us probably can't imagine making every one of our days of our life into something that was extraordinarily meaningful to the world. Right? We can have one thing happen, but the entire life is a whole other story. And that's what it's telling you here about him. And then it says...
Sorry, Rabbi, the mention, of course, when Rachel died, Raphael died. But I might have missed it somewhere along the line. Leah is sort of... Jacob goes with all the sons to Egypt, and no mention is made of what happens to Leah.
But
what actually happened to her?
She accompanies them.
Oh, she does?
Yeah, there's... See, the Torah doesn't ignore or mention someone out of courtesy. It only tells you something if there's a need to know. The rest of it, it has a presumption that you understand. If a man has a wife, and we don't tell you something enormous like his wife passes away, then you can presume she's with him, right? Or like it says, for instance, it says that Adam and Eve had 2 sons, right? And their sons had from them came many children, right? Who did they marry? Who did their 2 sons, Cain and Abel, marry? If there was only 2 people in the world, Adam and Eve, and they only had 2 sons, then who did they marry? How could they have children without wives? So from that question you say, well, there must be that Adam and Eve had more children, and they married their sisters, right? Which back then you had no choice but to marry your sisters. Only one person in the world, right? So that's what happened. But why doesn't the Torah tell you? Because you don't have to be a genius to figure out that they had to marry somebody, and there's only 2 people, so it had to be their sisters, right? That's how we understand it. So it's the same thing here. The Torah does not tell us everything that happens to everybody. It only tells us things that we need to know. The Torah is not a history book. It has history in it. It has science in it. It has ethics in it. But it is not categorized. So that's why it works that way. Okay? So it then tells us it became Vayikrovu Yomei Yisrael Lemos. It comes time for Yisrael to die. Now Yisrael and Yaakov, of course, is the same person. Right? Usually you can find the division why they use one name over another. Right? Everywhere else, when like Abraham's name was changed, you never see him using the old name. In fact, it says you're not supposed to use his old name, only his new name. But with Yaakov, his name was interchangeable because Yaakov had a dual role. One role was that he was Yaakov. He was an individual who was great, right? And he did a lot for the world. He was also the father of the Jewish nation. In other words, from him came the Jewish nation. Literally, from him came the Jewish nation. From his father, for instance, you could say Yitzchak also is a father of the Jewish nation because Yaakov came from him, and from Yaakov came everyone else. But from Yitzchak also came Esau. And Esau was the father of many non-Jewish nations. Yaakov is the father of only Jewish nations, right? So Abraham also, from him came the Arabs, right? Ishmael. From the Christians and the Romans, they came from Yitzchak. So, but who came from Yaakov? Just the Jews. So Yaakov was on one hand, an individual himself, but he was also the father of the Jewish nation. So when he's referred to in any way to deal with Yaakov as a person, a father to Yosef, a brother to Esau, an individual who does the good things that he does, he's always called Yaakov. Whenever he's referred to as the founder of the Jewish nation, the leader of the Jewish nation, or he's acting in that capacity, he's always referred to as Yisrael, because he's the founder of Israel. That's where Israel, the Jewish people, come from. Right? So here it says, first it says, this is the life of Yaakov. Yaakov, the individual, is going to die. He's getting old. But then it says, as the days of Yisrael got closer to his death, the same person, but now we're going to refer to him as the father of the Jewish people, is going to tell you something about the Jewish people. And so it says, Vayikra libno liYosef. He calls to his son Yosef. And he says, right, I need you to make a promise to me. He says, I want you to make sure that when I die, that I get buried in Israel. I don't want to be buried in Egypt. I want to be buried with my forefathers, with Abraham and Isaac. Right? And Adam and Eve are there as well. So the odd thing is that he doesn't just tell Yosef, I want you to do this, as it says. He says, place your hand under my thigh. Right? That's an expression. Not only is it an expression that means something else, it's also an expression that means something else that is also hinted at something additional. First thing is, what does he mean when he says, put your hand under my thigh? It doesn't mean to put your hand under my thigh. It means to put your hand on the place where I'm circumcised. Because this place of circumcision, right, was a part of the human body that became godlike. Because God said, circumcise this part of your body. Therefore, when you did God's will, then it's a symbol of this part of my body is symbolizing that I follow the Word of God. So therefore, if you put your hand on that part of my body and take an oath, you are basically saying an oath in the name of God. Right? Instead of saying, shake my hand, right, or some other symbol, this was for the Jews the great symbol. Because we were the only circumcised people in the world, really, as a nation at that time, or as a group. Right? You had individuals who did it. Ishmael was circumcised, but even though he wasn't one of us. But in general, circumcision was meant for the offspring of Abraham and later for the Jewish people. So here he's told, put your hand on the place where I'm circumcised. And what do I want you to, what does that mean? I want you to take an oath. I want you to swear to God that you're going to do what I'm asking you to do. And what does he ask him to do? Bury me in the land of my forefathers. When I die, I want you to take my body up to Israel and bury me in the cave that Abraham bought for Sarah. Where Abraham's buried, Sarah's buried, Isaac's buried. Right, that's where I want you to put me. So the commentaries ask a question, why take an oath? You think Yosef wouldn't do it? Yosef's going to say, no, I'm not going to do it. Or, yeah, sure, I'll do it, and then ignore him? This is Yosef. Yosef was a great person. He's not going to lie to his father. And if his father tells him he wants him to do this, he knows that in the purpose of the world, there's a need for this to happen. Right? Yaakov doesn't ask people to do things that are just because he thinks it's nice. I think it's nice that I'm buried next to my wife. That's not what he means. Because his wife Rachel, who he was the closest with, right? He's not even asked to be buried with her. She's buried somewhere else. She's the only one. So the answer is that Yaakov understood people. And he knew that Yosef would make every effort to try to bury him in Egypt. But there would be one thing that Yosef couldn't control, and that's Paro. And if Paro says, you're not sending your father to be buried in Israel, he's going to be buried here, then there's nothing Yosef could do. Paro is the most powerful man in the world. Yosef worked for him. He was number 2, but he was not number 1. So Yaakov, by taking this oath, telling Yosef to take this oath, would make it that Pharaoh would listen. Why? Because when Yosef says to Pharaoh, I understand you don't want me to take my father to Israel, but I took an oath. I swore to my father that I would do this. That then Pharaoh would understand the depth of this, and he would say, okay, he can do it. And that's exactly what happens. Later on in the Parsha, you'll see that it appears that Pharaoh does not want Yosef to leave with the body because he's afraid Yosef won't come back. Yosef's, basically his main man for any power and money that he has. So he doesn't want to lose Yosef. But when Yosef says, I took an oath to my father, Pharaoh doesn't argue with him. He lets him go. So you see that that Yaakov, who asked Yosef to swear, understood human psychology. He understood what Pharaoh was going to do. So he wasn't telling Yosef to take the oath because he didn't trust Yosef. He told him to take the oath in order to give him ammunition to be able to accomplish his goal. So he gives that, he swears. Then it says at the bottom of this page we have a statement that says, it came to pass after these things that someone came to Yosef and he said, your father is ill. Right, so he took his sons with him to go see his father. Now, we just said that Yaakov's about to die. Right? The Torah tells you. So wouldn't you think he's ill? Why are they saying, Yosef goes to see his father. His father's going to die. He leaves. Right? He's not going to die right now. He's just getting to that point. He leaves to go do his job, whatever he does. Right? And he'll come back later and see his father again. He's not going anywhere. Right? So he goes, and let's say a few days later, or whatever it is, somebody comes and says, your father's ill. So what's Yosef say? Hey, dummy, I know my father's ill. He's going to die. He's not going to die yet. So what's the news here? That he actually grabs his kids and runs because the guy says he's ill. So the Midrash tells us that until this point in history, nobody ever got sick. People didn't get sick. In history, what used to happen was that when a person died, they would sneeze and they would die. And the reason was because there was no illness in the world. There was no sickness. There was no disease. There was no such thing. It hadn't happened. And that when it was time for someone to die, they just died. It was God felt this person's lifespan is over. They died. People could live hundreds of years, but when it was time for them to go, they died. And how did God kill them? He made them sneeze. The sneeze was a sign of illness, that they were dead, they were dying. Because there was no cancer, leukemias, measles, colds, nothing, none of that. You don't see anybody in the Torah having an illness. This is the first time somebody is sick. And Medrash says that there's a reason for it. It says that when Yaakov realized that the days of his life were ending, as it just said in the Torah, he said, most people don't know that they're going to die. They just die. Right? There's no sickness. He says, he prays to God that you should make it that people should get sick before they die. So they should know that they're going to die, so they can take care of things in their life. They can take care of their personal needs. They can make up with people who they were fighting with or having disagreements with. They can spend time with their family so that they can talk to them. So that way basically they don't die with things undone. They're able to finish things before they die. So God, out of his kindness, blessed Yaakov that as of the time Yaakov is going to die, people will get sick first. Not always, but most of the time people when you see a person who gets, quite elderly and they get very sick, you think they may pass away. While an 8-year-old kid who gets very sick, you don't think they're going to pass away. Because an older person already, when they're getting sick, it's a sign that things are failing. And it gives that person time now to make amends with others, to handle their finances, to deal with their will. Whatever it is that they didn't do during their life, they can do it then. So Yaakov asked for that. So therefore it was news. When that person comes to Yosef and says, your father is ill, that's the first time in the history of the world that somebody was ill. You don't find it anywhere else until this point. Then that's why. So the Medrash says it was actually a kindness that God did to make Yaakov that way. Because Yaakov uses, from the time he's sick until the time he dies, he uses it very well. He takes every single family member and he tells them, using his prophetic ability, what they're doing wrong and what they're doing right in their life and how to improve themselves. And then he blesses them in order to enrich the good things about them. So each one, and it's in this parsha here, he blesses every single one of them, and what he says to them, and why it was so effective. And he used that ability, because he knew he was going to die, as the last thing that he did was to bless every member of his family. Right? And we see that coming up. So that's why it's such a big deal that he's told that he's dying. So then it says, So after he's told this, so now Yosef comes running to see his father, and he brings with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And he says, and in the last line it says, Jacob was told, right? He tells Jacob, Yosef tells him, behold, or someone tells him, your son Joseph has come. So it says that then Yaakov, now he becomes Yisrael. You notice the change? Mm-hmm. He goes from Yaakov, now he's Yisrael. He strengthens himself to sit up because he wants to bless them as the father of the Jewish people. He wants to bless every tribe, right? So Jacob says to Joseph, God appeared to me, and he goes on, right, what happens, and he says, and now you have your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt. Before I came here, Ephraim, who's the older, and Manasseh, who's younger, they'll be there, he tells Joseph, they will be like my own children, like Reuben and Shimon. Meaning that Ephraim and Manasseh were the next generation, right? They were grandchildren to Yaakov, not children to Yaakov. Nevertheless, Yaakov tells his son, your children are going to be like your brothers. In other words, in their status, every one of the brothers had a tribe. They were the head of a tribe of the Jews. The tribe of Levi, right? The tribe of Shimon, the tribe of Reuben. Every group, every person who was a son of Yaakov had his own tribe, which was part of the Jewish people. Ephraim and Manasseh were the next generation. But they were also, in many occasions, you'll see in the Torah, they're referred to as a tribe. Instead of calling it the tribe of Joseph, they have the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh. So, even though they were really just the children, but that's what he means, that your children, right, will be as if they're my children. They will have their own tribes. Right, and then he goes through this whole story of what happens. And then, if you look at verse 8, a very strange thing happens. Now, Yaakov just finished, right, because he switches back to Yaakov again, right, the next line. He just finished, as Yaakov, telling this whole story to Yosef, and talking about his two sons. Then it says, then Yisrael saw Joseph's sons, and he said, who are these? He just, the same person, when he was in the role of Yaakov, is talking about these two guys, Ephraim and Manasseh. Now suddenly he's Yisrael, he's changing his purpose, and he doesn't know who they are. Who are these two? So his son, Yosef, thinks my father is losing his mind. He's about to die, right? Right, he's losing his mind. So Yosef says, these are my sons who God gave me here in Egypt. So he says to him, bring them to me and I'll bless them. Right? So what's happening here now is going to be a very astounding thing that's going to happen. You'll see, Yisrael's eyes were heavy with age; he couldn't see, so he brought them near, and he kissed them and hugged them. Yisrael says to Joseph, "I dare not accept the thought that I would see your face, and here God has shown me, even your children." Right? Yaakov, right? Now Yisrael is saying, "I never thought I'd see Joseph again. You were taken away from me for decades. And now God has blessed me that I see you and your sons." So Joseph takes his sons from his knees, right, and he puts them before his father. So Joseph took the two of them, Ephraim with his right hand to Israel's left. Why? Because Ephraim, right, you have the two sons, right? I'll explain to you. Then Manasseh with his left hand to Israel's right, right? So they're facing Yaakov or Yisrael. So one's on the right side, one on the left side, right? So you bless them like this. Right? So what does he do? So first he blesses Joseph because he's the father, and he says, "O God, before whom my forefathers Avram and Isaac walked, to God who helped shepherd me from the inception till this day, may the angel who redeems me from all evil bless the lads, and may the name be declared upon them in the names of my forefathers Avram and Isaac, and may they proliferate like fish within the land." Joseph saw that his father was placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, and it displeased him, because Ephraim was the younger son. So the older son should get the right hand. Right, because the right hand is the sign of mercy in Jewish tradition. That's the stronger hand. So the older son should get the privilege because he's older, right? But what did Yaakov do? He did this. He blessed them like this. Instead of blessing them the way you think he should, with the older one on his right hand and the younger one on his left hand, which is how Yosef placed them, right? Which is the normal way. He switches his hands, right? Which is very weird. Like, why would he switch his hands? So he thinks his father is confused. Right? That's what's happening. At first his father says, who are these? After he just talked about them. Then he switches his hands. Right? So Yosef thinks his father's starting to lose his mind. So he says, Joseph took the two of them, right? Well, they said, Joseph saw that his father was placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, and it displeased him, so he supported his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to put it on Manasseh's head, because Manasseh was the older of the two. Joseph said to his father, not so, father, for this is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. But his father refused. And he said, I know, my son, I know. He says, I know what I'm doing. I didn't lose my mind. I don't have Alzheimer's. You haven't caught up to me yet. Right? But his father refused, saying, I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great. Yet his younger brother shall become greater than he, and his offspring's fame will fill the nations. Right? So he sees through prophecy that the younger brother will be greater than the older brother. Right? So how is it? You have the two brothers. They're very different people. One of the brothers is totally involved in Jewish life. The other one was basically the secretary to Yosef. Yosef was the most powerful guy there, right, under Pharaoh. He was running the country, so he needed an assistant. So his other son was the assistant, right? One was totally involved in Torah learning and working with the Jews, and the other one, right, was a religious guy, did everything he's supposed to do, but he was involved with his father's world. Remember, his father's world was very different than his grandfather's world. Yaakov was totally involved with Jewish life, with working with the Jews, the spirituality of the Jews, right? Yosef he ran a government. He had a Jewish life at home, just as like how we are. He had a Jewish life, but he had a job outside, right? So one of his sons was like him, and one of the sons was like Yaakov, right? So, but his father refused, and he says this. So he blessed them that day. How does he bless them? By you shall Israel bless, saying, may God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh. And he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Even though Ephraim was younger and Manasseh is older, it should have been Manasseh first, but he switched them. So he said, so what is he saying there? He's saying that throughout history, everyone should be blessed, and the blessing should be, may God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh. Right? And if you know that it's a custom on Friday night that people bless their children, and if they don't do it on Friday night, they should be at least doing it in Arab Yom Kippur. And this is what they say, to a male at least. They say, may God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh. Till this day, right, every Friday night I do this to my sons. I have a different blessing for my daughter, but you say this blessing, and it's not me, everybody does this. And he said, this is where it comes from. He says, you should say this blessing. In other words, not just on these two men. So now we have to wonder. Here you've got Ephraim and Manasseh. They were so young. They were sitting on his father's knee. It says he took them off his knee and placed them before his grandfather to get the blessing. So the grandfather already knew who these two had become, how great they would be. And he says that the big blessing I'm going to give you is that in the future, every Jewish child should be blessed to be like them. So what's so special about them? They say, they shall be blessed to be like my father Isaac, or be like my grandfather Abraham. You want to bless your children? Bless your children. They should be like Abraham. Right? Why not?
I attended on a Shabbos here. I was at one of Rabbi, I think it was Rabbi Spitz's shiur, and during the discussion, it must have been last year at this time, I suppose, when this came up. And the suggestion came up that why the blessing is specifically these two brothers is that these two brothers were close. All the other brothers, when you start looking at all the brothers throughout, there's always been friction. Cain and Abel, Isaac and Ishmael, although there wasn't actually friction, he was, apparently teaching
all the way up through the brothers of Joseph.
And then Jacob and Esau, and all along, and then the brothers to Joseph. And it was discussed in the shiur that these were the only two brothers who were close to each other, and that's why Jacob blessed them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I've heard that answer. Otherwise, a reason that we have for this, that it's done, is that these are also the first two really Jewish leaders, even though they're not really Jewish yet, right? But Hebrew leaders who were born outside of Israel, right? From this point. In other words, when Yaakov himself, he's raised by Isaac and Rivka. You can imagine he probably had a pretty Jewish life, right? His father was one of the greatest people. His mother was one of the greatest people. He probably had a life where, let's update it, right? You get a kid who's raised in in the center of Jerusalem by religious parents, right? Anything can happen, but chances are, if his parents are really serious, good people, that his kid's going to grow up to be a religious kid, right, with a lot of the traits of what the Jewish people should have. I'm not saying it has to be, but putting him into the right environment and having the right friends and the right life is certainly going to help. Compare that to the Jewish kid who's raised in Sioux City, Iowa, or in Walla Walla, Washington, where he's the only Jewish family in the whole city, right? And they're religious. So everybody goes and plays Little League on Shabbos, and he can't. And all of his friends go out to McDonald's, and he can't. Right? So what's the chance that he's going to grow up and be an observant Jew? Maybe, but it's certainly a harder situation to expect that he would be. So, Ephraim and Manasseh's blessing. Right? Yaakov understood that Jews throughout history are going to spend a lot of time not living in Israel. Right? For whatever reason it is, the Jews are going to be dispersed throughout the world, and we're not going to be living in Israel. And we're going to be raising our kids in Walla Walla, Washington, and in Macon, Georgia, and in little Fayetteville, New York, little towns all over the place, where we might be the only ones. So he's saying, here are the first two who are raised in a non-Jewish society. They were raised by their father, Yosef, in Egyptian society, in a corrupt, right, really ugly society. And nevertheless, they came out as great people. So Yaakov is saying, I want, throughout history, when you raise your children in the Torontos or in the Walla Walla Washingtons, wherever you are in the world, you bless your children to be like Ephraim and Manasseh, that wherever they come from, they're still going to remain true to being Jewish. So that's one of the responses that we have to that. So after he finishes that special thing, he now goes on to say that he wants all of his sons. He wants them all to come. And there's a few things, just because of time, I'm not going to be able to go through all of them, but here's basically what we've got is we have Ephraim, we have all of the sons coming. This is what Yaakov does. Yaakov tells Yosef, I want all of the sons to come. So he brings all the sons into a room. Right? Yaakov is sitting in his bed. Right? He's going to, his deathbed. He's sitting up in his deathbed, and he's got the sons all around him now. And he blesses each one of them separately. Right? That's what he does. Now, that's what's going to happen here. And each one, you have this strength, this is great about you, this is a problem with you, you should work on this, and you'll get better. You have this problem, you have that. Right? That's what he's going to do. We know the history, that Yaakov's brothers, right, had real problems getting along with each other. Right? They wanted to kill Yosef. Yosef was the favored son, and they wanted to kill him. In the end, they didn't kill him, but they certainly didn't treat him right. They sold him as a slave. Then you see the brothers, like you have Yehuda over here, this one over here, they're not even together all the time. Like they're separated from each other. They're all different. They're all doing different things. Yaakov knows that that because of that fact that he let it be known that Yosef was his favorite son, and that he constantly did that kind of thing, right, in raising his children, that there was fighting between the sons. Right or wrong, he saw it. So now he's about to die. He's about to bless them. And each one separately he's going to bless. And he's going to tell each one of them the good things and bad things about them that he knows through prophecy. Why doesn't he do it alone? He makes sure that all of them are there. Right? All of the sons are there to hear what he says about each one. You should think you know what I want to do? I want to bring them all in, and I'm going to bless them all together. And then I'm going to tell them to leave, and I'm going to bring one in at a time. I'm going to tell that one, look, this you got to work on this. You got to fix that. In this area, you're amazing. Right? And then go to the next one and do it. Because what's going to happen? This one son's going to say, did you hear the blessing he gave that son? His blessing was better than my blessing. That one, he got this blessing. That guy, he is such a bad guy. He tricked our father, and now our father thinks he's the best. That's what they're going to do. The same thing they did their whole life. So they're going to do it now. So why does Yaakov invite them in? He should have said one at a time. He doesn't. He invites them all in. It's like we're all sitting here, and I tell each one of you what I think about you in front of everybody else. And it could be, I think, good things. But still, it's certainly not nice. So why does he do that? So the commentaries explain that there were numerous reasons for it, but one of them is that they were having a trial by fire, right? Just by virtue of the fact of how they acted at the end of the story with Binyamin, where they were prepared to die rather than let Binyamin go. It became clear that they rose above their petty fighting, that their differences, that they were now going to unite, right, to the best of their ability, and that their character had changed. So Yaakov wants every single one of them to hear the good and the bad of each other, because he wants them to be a team, to work with each other. This one has a problem with his self-worth. This one has a problem that he's lazy. This one has a problem that he's arrogant. We're all going to help each other to become better. And Yaakov understood that at this point in their life they were able to do that. So he wanted them gathered around. Now, just like they were gathered around his deathbed here, this had the exact same formation. Who stood where? It happens later on in the Torah when they're going through the desert. When it says that the Jews were traveling through the desert and they had the Torah with them and they had the portable temple with them, so that was in the center, right? And around it were all the tribes, symbolic of the brothers, and they were in the exact same place. Whoever was at the head of the bed, right, by Yaakov was at that place, same place in the formation. The one who was by his left hand was on the left side. The one on the right hand was on the right side. And it was a message that as you're going to go through the troubles in the desert, that you have to remember to unite, to stay as one. Just like you were able to unite at the death of your father, you have to unite as you go through the desert. And if you don't, you won't make it. And that was the message that they were sending here. Because Yaakov could see through prophecy what was going to happen in the future. So it says that he did that. Now, beginning on just on the bottom of 49, it tells us, Vayichabsu b'shimu b'nei Yaakov. Then Yaakov called for his sons, and he says, bring yourselves together, and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the end of days. Gather yourselves and listen, O sons of Jacob. Right? So here, right, this section where they brings them together, right? So he's going to tell them what's going to happen at the end of days. If you read the rest, he doesn't do it. Yeah, the end of days means, when is the Messiah coming? When is God going to bring the world to the point where everyone realizes that the world has a spiritual purpose? It's not just here to make money. And the whole world will come to that realization. When is that going to happen? So he says, I'm going to tell you before I die. And he doesn't tell them. But if you, just for time, I'm not going to go through them all, but I'll show you where he actually does, or where he is prepared to. If you look on the bottom of 279, the last line. Yeah, well, on that one, it says, look at the last line. Dan will avenge his people. The tribes of Israel will be united as one. Dan will be a serpent on the highway, a viper by the path that bites a horse's heel so his rider falls backward. For your salvation do I long, O Hashem. So here he's blessing Dan, his son. That's his name, Dan, right? And he's saying that you're going to be like the serpent on the highway, right? A snake on the highway that bites the horse's foot and causes him to throw the rider off. In other words, right? You're going to be like guerrilla warfare, right? Let's make it up. The United States is going to come and attack you, right? And you're this little nation, like they're going to kill you. But you are going to be like a snake that bites the horse. You're going to and make them throw the whole army off. Everyone's going to, the United States is going to go falling on the ground, just because you were able to accomplish that. So what it's talking about here is the story of Samson. It hasn't happened yet, but Yaakov sees it in prophecy that Samson, or Shimshon in Hebrew, right, is defending the Jewish people against the Plishtim, the Philistines, and they're losing. And they take, you know the story, they take Samson and they tie him up, right, and they blind him in one eye, and then they're going to blind him in his other eye, and they blind him in his other eye, and then he prays to God, and God gives him the strength again, because remember he was strong, and then they cut his hair, and he's not strong anymore. There's a much deeper story than that, but what actually happens is he prays to God, and God gives him the power to collapse the building and kills all the police team, including himself, but because of it, the Jews are saved. So it says here that Dan, right, this person Dan, is the forefather of Samson. Right? He comes from Dan. And Samson is Mashiach. That's who he was. If you want to know who the Messiah was supposed to be, it was supposed to be Samson. But he failed. In other words, the Mashiach has the ability that we can fail and the Mashiach won't come. Or we might have a need for the Mashiach, and the Mashiach can fail. He could not live up to his potential, and then it won't work. And that's what happened. Shimshon did not live up to his potential. He went astray. He married the Plishtim woman, and he wasn't the person he was supposed to be. And therefore, when he rose to the occasion at the end of his life, and he killed all of the Plishtim in order to save the Jews, but he himself died. And that's why Yaakov ends by saying, your redemption I await for God. In other words, he saw Samson was the Messiah, and that was going to happen, and then it didn't happen because he failed, and he tells his sons, then I have to wait for the redemption. I don't know the answer. It was supposed to be him. Yeah, that's what he was telling them. So that's why he doesn't tell us when it is, but that, according to this opinion, but that he actually thought that was going to be it. That was his prophecy, told him this. But then when he actually spoke the prophecy did not come out the way that he thought it would, and it told him that Samson was going to fail. And then later, if you look in the book of Judges, and you see the story of Samson, you see that he was a great person, and he was raised, it says, he was raised from before he was born as a Nazarite, which is a spiritual level, and his whole life he was that. That's why his hair was long, and that's why when they cut his hair it affected him. Right? But the reason that she could cut his hair is that he married a non-Jewish woman, right? And he didn't do things the way he was supposed to, and it failed. But that's where it comes up here. So that's just one. Another one that we should look at, just because of our time, is the story of Yehuda. Yehuda is a good one. That's on 277. I mean, they're all good ones, but there's one that I want to talk to you about. The bottom of 277, the last line in Yehuda, you, your brothers, shall acknowledge. Your hand will be at your enemy's nape. Your father's sons will prostrate themselves before you. A lion's cub is Yehuda. So Yehuda is the prince. He's going to be anybody who is royalty in the Jewish people has to come from the tribe of Yehuda. All King David, King Solomon, they had to come from the tribe of Yehuda. That was Yaakov saw that all of the royalty would come from that. Also, the military came from Yehuda. Right? That's what he was. He was the leader. So it says here that your brothers shall acknowledge you. And if you look at it in the Hebrew, Yehuda ata yaducha achicha, your brothers will know you. Right? Here it says acknowledge you. And both are true. So it says that you notice that of all of the tribes, the Jews are called by his name. Like if somebody asks you, what are you? You say you're a Jew. It means that you're from Judah, from Yehuda. That's where you come from. Right? You don't necessarily come. I don't. I'm a Levi. I don't come from the tribe of Yehuda, but I'm still a Jew. The Jews are called Yehuda. Right? In fact, almost every language I've ever studied, except for one, they all call us Jew. right? The Germans have Juden, right? There's Yid, which is Žid in Polish. You have it in Russian. You have it in all these different languages. They refer to us as Jew, right? Only one, Italian, is Hebreo, Hebrew. But even in Spanish, everybody calls us Jew. Right? Isn't that funny? Of all the things, they call us a Jew. They call us a Jacobite or an Abramite. They call us Jews, right? And it's every language. It's not just our culture that does it. All of them do it. And it says the reason why. Well, of course, Yehuda is the king, but why Yehuda? So you have to go back to where Yehuda's name comes from, and it comes from the story where Leah, right, has a fourth son. She understood there's 4 wives, right? Leah understood there's 4 wives for you. Yaakov has 4 wives. There's going to be 12 sons. They knew it prophetically. There are going to be 12 tribes. So each one of us, if there's 4 of us, each one of us will have 3 sons. Right? She had her 4th son. Something's wrong, right? Somebody's not going to have a son because I got 4. So she says, what does she say when Yehuda is born? She says, I'm going to praise God because I got more than I deserve. Now, I deserve 3, just like all the other wives. I got 4. So I will praise God because 4 of the great tribes of Jewish people will come from me. So, and who was the 4th? It was Yehuda. Okay, and that's where the name Yehuda comes from. Yehuda means to praise. Hodah is praise. Todah, thank you. Right? Same word. Yehuda means those who praise. And it's because, what is the praise? I got more than I deserve. Because for a Jew needs to understand that whatever we have, whatever we get, is more than we deserve. Whatever God gives to us, whatever blessing He gives to us, we don't deserve it. It's a gift. We can work, we can do whatever we want, but the bottom line is, it's whatever we get from God. All the blessings that we get in this life is more than we deserve. It's what we get, but it's more than we deserve. If we live our lives that way, we will be good, humble people. And that's what the Jews are supposed to be. Jews are supposed to be the people who realize that whatever we get in life is more than we deserve, and we're happy. That was what Leah was saying when she had the child, and that's what it means when we're referred to as Jews, because the world is reminding us that whatever you have is more than you deserve, and if you live your life that way, you'll be a happy person. And that's why we're referred to that way as Jews by everybody in the world, because we stand for that idea. So that comes from here. Now, why does it say, that he's a lion's cub? A lion's cub is Judah. From the prey, my son, you elevated yourself. What does a lion's cub do? He says he crouches, lies down like a lion, and like an awesome lion who dares rouse him. Right? The scepter shall not depart from Yehuda. Right? So the scepter not depart from Yehuda means that there can be no king among the Jews other than from the tribe of Yehuda. Now there was. That was the Hashmonim, who the story of Hanukkah is about. After they saved the temple and they pushed the Greeks out, the Hashmonim were Kohanim, they were priests, and they decided we better become the king because there's nobody else. We got to do it. Like the Jewish people have defected, we have to reinvent Judaism again. We have to get people back. So they became king. Were they good people? Yep. Would the world not be like it was if it wasn't for them? They saved us in the story of Hanukkah. It was their work. Right? Nevertheless, the Talmud tells us that if anybody says to you today that I come from the family of the Hashmonim, they're lying. Because there is no more people from the family of Hashmonim. They all became gone or slaves and disappeared. Why? Because they accepted to become kings when they're not allowed to be kings. Only Yehuda is allowed to be kings. You say, wait a minute, these were great people. They said, we have to be king. There's nobody else. We have to do it. And that's true. They were great people. But they didn't have the authority to do it. So even though they were great people, God said, no, you can't be king. And the people were wiped out. It wasn't that someone came and killed them. Over time, they dissipated. There were no more Hashmonim left in the world. They were gone. They're still Kohanim, but not that group of them, because of that. That's what it means that the scepter will not depart from Yehuda. Now, why is it? It refers to him as a lion. That makes sense. A lion is a symbol of royalty, very often, right? But why does it call him a crouching lion who lays low? Right? And who will wake him up? How about a roaring lion standing in the middle of the park, roaring as the king? Is a symbol of a lion sleeping really the symbol that we're talking about? That's what he says, right? So the commentaries say that now, who was Yehuda? Remember I told you the story about Yehuda and Tamar before, where Yehuda has relations with her, and he stands up and says, she's more righteous than me. She should not be killed. I realize now, what had happened, and she was ready to die rather than embarrass me. And now that I know the facts, right, that's what happens. Now, like I said, Yehuda could have done a lot of things and not told on himself. He could have just pushed it under the carpet. Nobody would know. That means that he had to have amazing discipline. Right? He had to have amazing discipline to do that, because nobody would ever know. He'd say, I'm going to lose my position. Can you imagine? I'm the rabbi, and God forbid, and then you open the paper tomorrow and it says I'm arrested in a sweep of a prostitution thing. I can't come to work the next day. Mm-hmm. Not only I'm going to be too embarrassed, you won't keep me. I'll be gone. Right? Who wants a rabbi that gets arrested with prostitution? So that's what Yehuda. Yehuda was like this great leader, and he has relations with this woman. Now he was if you read the whole story, he didn't do anything wrong in the end, but he thought he was doing something that wasn't perfect, right? And then she was going to pay the price for it, and he stood up and said, "No, it's me." So it was a great thing that he did, even though it came about in a bad way. That ability of him, right, to discipline himself and to do the right thing, that's what a crouching lion is. A crouching lion is a lion who lays under the grass and just stays there with all of his discipline and doesn't move a muscle. And when the prey comes by, it jumps out like it wasn't there in the first place. Tell me, if you were a gazelle, right, running around Africa, and you see a lion, you're not going to go near him, right? If you see the grass moving, there's a lion in there, I'm going the other way, right? He could sit there and there's no movement. This is the most powerful animal, right? No movement, no sign of him. He's underneath the grass. You don't see him. The grass isn't moving. And then, boom, he gets you. That's discipline. That shows you the strength of the lion, that he could hold himself back, right, until the right moment, and nobody knew he was there. That's what it's talking about with Yehuda. Yehuda had amazing discipline. The ability, the way we would call it today is called, it's called noblesse oblige in Latin, which means, or in French, it means the obligation of the noble. Just like, the king has an obligation, to make sure that the people eat. I'm royalty. I have everything, but with royalty, I am obligated to help you. I have to make sure you have what you need. I'm royalty. That's my job, right? That's what I do. I'm obligated, right? I have, why would the king has to show up at all of these events? Why? He's not going to do anything there. And he can't do his job when he's showing up at events. But that's noblesse oblige. You have to go. You have to show the people that you care. You have to show the people that you're there. You have to show your face at the symphony. You support the symphony. You want people to attend the symphony, so you go when you're the king. Right? That's discipline. Right? I'm going to do these things that I have no interest in doing, because I have to do it, because I have to show the people that this is the right thing. That's what the nobles do. The obligation of the nobles. And that's what Yehuda did. That takes discipline. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's what he's saying, that he's like a crouching lion. He has that inner discipline. And that's what the message to us. If you want to be a leader, being a leader doesn't mean getting up in front of everyone and yelling and screaming all the time. It means acting with proper discipline so that people can emulate you. If you have a rabbi that only yells and screams at you all the time and calls you, makes you feel bad, you're not going to become anything. You're going to leave. You're not going to stay. Nobody wants to feel bad all the time. Yeah, there's times when you should you should get that type of thing, but not regularly, not all the time. You end up with no self-respect, no self-image, because the rabbi knocks you down all the time, or your father knocks you down all the time, or your spouse knocks you down all the time. Right? If that happens, it doesn't help you. I mean, and therefore the person who's in that role has to have discipline and say, if I see you do something wrong, I don't just yell at you. I have to think it through. What's the most effective way of helping them?